Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. John, and I am the fitness psychologist, coming at you live from John Chestnut Park in Palm Harbor, Florida, overlooking Lake Tarpon. Absolutely beautiful day here in Florida. It's about 74 degrees, and it's our ideal fall weather here. Before we get started today, I just want to go over the usual housekeeping issue, which is if you're listening and something resonates with you, please go online, whether it's iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and leave us a 5-star review, and that allows us to keep putting out the great content for you and keeps this whole train rolling. Today I got a special guest. He's a great friend of mine from high school, and he's been shooting some awesome photography for me all weekend here, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome my very good friend, one of my best friends ever, Tracy Gwinnett. Tracy, welcome.
Hey, John. How are you doing?
Tracy's been gracious enough to be a guest here today, and Tracy's kind of in the contemplation stage when it comes to taking a step forward with his health. He's battled some difficulties over the years, which I'll let him describe more, but he was gracious enough to kind of discuss things because I can always talk about the different solutions, but I think it's good for everybody to know that they're not alone, and there are a lot of different unique challenges that come into play. And oftentimes, like I've said, and the purpose of this show is to talk about the mental barriers that really can impede us from reaching our goals, whether it's nutrition or fitness or both. And so Tracy's been kind enough to give us some insight into what he's battling now, and we're going to talk about a game plan for what's going to happen going forward. So Tracy, talk a little bit about the difficulties that you've been having over the years and what you'd like to see happen from here.
Sure, John. Well, I've been, overweight most of my life, most of my adult life, and I mean that's been a struggle with me, off and on throughout my whole life, and I've definitely had, some weight gain over the years, and then weight loss, and I've done pretty well with like eating and exercise at certain points in my life, and then kind of fallen off the wagon and not done as well. And I mean that's something that I would like to be healthier. In general, just to, be there for my daughter long term and
sure.
My family and my wife and, just be around longer. I want to be healthy. Gotcha. And have a long life and have a healthy life and, not have to go through any kind of health complications based on, my health process, if you will. I mean, and my daily process of, eating and exercise and activity and, staying motivated. Those things have all been, a bit of a struggle for me, long term. Gotcha. So, I mean, I'd like to change that.
Well, we're off to a good start because, and I know it sounds cliche, but we always ask people, what is your why? And it sounds like you've established a pretty good why there, a very good why. You want to be around for your family. You want to stay healthy. There's still a lot of things that you want to do in this life. And so establishing that why is that is the key first step, because if we don't have the right motivation in place, especially having that intrinsic motivation, something that's really fulfilling, then it's going to be very tough for us to get off the ground. So talk to me a little bit more about the psychological barriers, if you will, that have really gotten in the way. Because, I mean, like you said, you've tried to do things over the years. You've seen things kind of go back and forth. You've had some success and then had things kind of regress on you. What would you say are the psychological barriers? Because as I've said before on this show, we can have the perfect nutrition plan in place and we have the perfect exercise plan in place, and all these things work, but without the right kind of mindset, it's difficult to keep compliant with these types of plans. What would you say have been the greatest barriers for you up to this point?
Well, I mean, I was raised in an environment where, food came easily. There was plenty of good food to be had. And, and I would never blame anybody for my eating habits per se, but I grew up in a place where if I was stressed out or I had some kind of issue where I needed comfort in some way, it was suggested to me that, food was an option of helping me.
Gotcha.
Like, oh, you're not feeling well, here's some food, and I don't blame that on my parents or my grandparents or anything like that. But my grandmother was a great cook, and my mom's been a good cook, and my wife is a good cook, and that certainly does lend itself to, oh yeah, there's great food to be had all around. But honestly, I put the onus on myself in that. I often am a stress eater, and I eat for comfort, and I eat for enjoyment and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people do eat for enjoyment, but
we wouldn't have a restaurant industry if we didn't.
Right. And I think I somewhat eat to excess on occasion, and that's been a struggle. And I don't always eat the right foods. I love food of all kinds. Like, I love vegetables, I love proteins, I love the stuff that's good for you, but I like all the stuff that's bad for you too. So
Sure.
And I don't know. I mean, I think it's just been my go-to. And I don't know if I'm necessarily addicted to food, but it's a possibility. I certainly, it is kind of my go-to comfort place.
Okay.
So I think that's psychologically, I think that's been the thing. It's been my sort of defense mechanism.
What would you say are the biggest triggers for you that make you reach to food?
Well, I mean, if I'm having a particularly stressful day, I come home and I've noticed it in myself often that I eat more, and I go to food as some way of dealing with that stress. I grew up in a household where my dad was a drinker and an alcoholic,
Gotcha.
and he definitely dealt with his stresses via alcohol.
Okay.
And I'll have a drink now and again, but I mean, I can push alcohol away with no problem. I don't find that I'm addicted to alcohol in the least. But I mean, I definitely do the same thing he was doing with alcohol, but I do it with food.
Okay.
And then, the other thing too is, I mean, I could get more exercise, and I could be more regular about my exercise. And that's certainly, I often find I lack motivation to get out and do exercise, and to even do it around the house sometimes, do simple things around the house. Like, I'd rather sit than, take part in something.
Right.
So
Interesting parallel when you mention your father and his use of alcohol, and then you talk about eating. And in psychobabble, we sometimes talk about these things as obsessive compulsive behaviors, which means we're doing something, but we're doing something to extreme. And usually when we're doing that, we're trying to fill some sort of void that we have in our lives, and it's a way of coping. And it's something that, and I know you said you weren't trying to blame anyone, but at the same time, it's something that is familiar for us.
Well, I think some of it was learned behavior.
Right. And
the things I saw my father doing, and he was a big eater too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my dad actually was about as unhealthy as you can imagine. I mean, if there was an unhealthy thing for him to do, he pretty much did it. He was hard on his body. He was an auto mechanic, and
Sure.
he was, he was a big eater, and he was a big drinker, and I mean, he was a smoker. So I mean, he was pretty well. He died at 58, unfortunately. So I mean, he lived kind of a rough life health wise. And, a lot of that I think is definitely learned behavior. The way he ate as I got to be into my, grade school years and beyond, I would eat the way he ate. Like, if he ate a whole steak in a sitting, well, then I would do the same. And even though I was young and much smaller body wise and didn't need that kind of level of, calories, I was still eating like I was an adult male when I wasn't. And I think that carried forward. But I mean, again, I do put the onus on me. I've certainly in all the years since, I mean, I certainly often will, I don't know, I eat more than I probably should. So portion control is something that's an issue. And
well, oftentimes the relationship with food and what we see modeled for us, even though we try to avoid it, it's easy to fall into that pattern. And, sometimes what we grow up with, we become. Not always. But in some cases, when a certain type of behavior is modeled, it's easy to follow that. I mean, that's the first exposure we see to how to have that kind of relationship with food. And unfortunately, sometimes, when you talk about times of stress, what do we do when we're in the times of stress? We reach for something that's comfortable for us, something that's familiar for us.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to kind of break that cycle and break that pattern. You mentioned exercise. What types of exercise have you been attempting to do up to this point? I guess better question. What works for you?
When I was exercising more frequently than I am now, I mean, walking was big for me because it was convenient, more than anything else, because I was able to just jump outside and walk around the block, and I can walk pretty good lengths, good distances in my own neighborhood, and plus to me it's low impact, which is for me was important. And I've recently had a back injury in the last year, so I mean some of the heavier exercise, some of the more stressing on your body exercise. I'm not able to do some of that stuff, and then some of it has been, the fact that I don't often have time to try to go to the gym or things like that. So I try to do the things that work out scheduling wise for me. So like walking's been big, and I often do things that are more tasks around the house, but they are exercise. I mean, like fixing things around the home and around my property and things like that. Those are the things that I've gravitated towards the most. There was a period of time where I was going to the gym and I was working out and I was lifting weights and I was doing that stuff, and that only lasted about a year, admittedly. And
what was that like for you when you were in that group going to the gym for that year?
It felt different because it was something I hadn't ever done in my life. So initially it was a little novel because it was like, well, hey, I'm a gym guy now. So it felt a little weird because I never kind of considered myself that sort of person.
Now, was it intimidating at all when you first started going?
It was very much so.
Talk more about that.
Yeah,
that's one of the biggest barriers I see, and I even talk a little bit about that in my book. Is people are reluctant to go to the gym, especially when they're in that early phase of making the change and getting into shape. Because we go into that gym and we're still learning how to use all of these equipments, all the equipment and everything. And you got people in there that are chiseled and fit and buff, whatever you want to call it. And we walk in and that can be very intimidating.
It was intimidating. I felt like I didn't belong there because, again, most of the people there were in pretty good shape. And I didn't feel as though I was. So it's a little embarrassing, frankly. Like I was on the treadmill and I was jiggling all over the place. And, I'm running next to this, I remember this one particular incident where I was running next to this woman who was in very, very good shape. And I'm, and I got winded pretty quickly compared to her. And, and I was kind of like, I had fat jiggling all over the place. And yeah, it is. It's kind of embarrassing and it's intimidating. And it definitely kind of works against your motivation to be there because it's like,
but at least you were there.
I was. And the other thing too is I think I honestly found that I'm one of these people that I like instant gratification more than I probably should. So I wanted to see results quicker, and I wasn't seeing results as quickly as I could, and so that was a little sort of I felt like demotivated by that.
And that's one of the hardest things too, is because we are a quick fix society, and we do want to see those results really fast, and but when it comes to exercise and nutrition, I mean, we can see some results after a fairly short amount of time, but to see the noticeable results that we're really wanting to see, that can take sometimes several months. Sometimes it can take a couple years, depending on what we're trying to accomplish. And so it's the key really so much is just having that consistency and day in and day out. And sometimes that's hard to do because we want that reinforcement like right on the spot. And the key there, I one of the things I talk about as well, in my writing was it's really important to find what's intrinsically motivating for you day to day when it comes to doing those workouts, and not just doing it for your family or doing it for your health, but sometimes we have what's called non-scale victories, where maybe maybe the scale's not moving very much, but perhaps our clothing is fitting differently. Maybe we have more energy. Maybe that time that you're exercising, the endorphins are pumping and you are feeling less depressed.
Yeah, I experienced that. I definitely experienced, a great amount of energy compared to what I normally have. I definitely did feel, less depressed about my situation. And I think, being heavy has added to my depression over the years. And then the depression sort of cycles back and adds to the overweight condition. Because
right, it can become a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle.
One feeds into the other.
Yeah. So I definitely did. I started to feel like a positive uplift. I was on an upward circle, it all did start to
You
add to
got past
itself.
the apprehension after a while of being
It
there.
did. I mean, the first month of eating differently and exercising, I mean, that was the hardest. But that felt sort of like a hump that I had to get over. And then like the second month, it felt even better. So it's something I intend to sort of get back on the horse of and do. And I need to start to engineer my life around it. But I found for me personally, I didn't like to call it what I was doing a diet, because a diet seems temporary.
Right.
And
Diets are no good.
yeah, I wanted to be able to find a way of eating better for the rest of my life.
Sure.
And just decide that, okay, this is the way I eat now. And I did that for quite a long time. I lost over the course of a year, I lost about 90 pounds, and that
Wow.
was
That's
a lot.
incredible.
Yeah, and I felt great. I looked good, like I was like taking all these Facebook selfies.
Oh,
you know?
I remember.
I look good.
I remember seeing all the pictures, and you were shrinking right before our eyes. And
yeah, it felt great.
I was so excited for you. And
yeah, well, and it's something I need to get back to doing. I think with my recent injury, and admittedly, I think I've used that as a bit of a crutch. I think I've said, well, I'm injured, so I don't, I don't have to move around. Well, yeah, you do. You have to move around, and I did some physical therapy, and that physical therapy was painful, but it actually got me more flexible. It gave me a little bit more energy. So the more I'm moving, the better I feel. And like when I get up in the morning, instead of getting up and laying in bed for an extra 2 hours, like I get up and do things, and that was something that was different for me too. And like at the time, I also was having some sleep issues that I no longer had, and I got over that hump. And so, I mean, I kind of collectively had this burst, and it worked.
That's great.
And then I kind of fell off the wagon with it a bit. So it's something I need to get back to.
And I hear you when you talk about having, using the injury as a crutch, because we've all made excuses at one point or another. I mean, I know, gosh, in my triathlon days when I had workouts that I was supposed to do, I used every excuse in the book. I was injured. It was my plantar fasciitis flaring up. It was, I'm a sleep apnea sufferer as well, and so I'm not sleeping properly. I have no energy. I'm having stomach issues, because I was eating like shit. I was trying to do triathlons, but I'm still eating like shit. And you're trying to eat a greasy pizza and then go running. Yeah, of course, it's not going to work very well.
No. Yeah.
And so when we I was the king of making excuses, and that's one of the things on my journey, over the course of 2019, that I've just stopped making the fucking excuses, because when you do that and I started telling the truth to myself about what was really keeping me from doing things, and it wasn't all those other things keeping me from accomplishing things or doing exercise or following the nutrition. It was me. The only thing that could keep me from doing it was me. And
yeah, I found I was, in the course of doing it, when I was actually succeeding with it, I felt like, wow, like I started to realize, like, I've been my biggest obstacle here. And I wanted to, personal responsibility in my life as of late has been big. Like I try to look at myself and in a more constructive manner. I don't want to say critically, but there is some, not criticism, but, critically in a positive way. And I try to, say, okay, where are ways that I could change, and what things could I improve upon? How could I get better at doing something? And I say holistically, not just with my health, but my relationships, the people in my life. How can I get better at everything, and just do better? And I think I'm 44 years old, so I'm in that sort of midlife area of my life, and I'm kind of reevaluating. And I think half your life is gone, and you're saying to yourself, okay, I want to change things up, maybe have some new adventures and go different places, and and I want to have a long life to be able to do all that stuff. I want to travel, want to do all that stuff, and go with my friends places. And if I'm going to do that, I have to be of good health. And my daughter is 16, and I want to be around for her as long as I possibly can. Want to show her the world as much as I can, and help her and guide her, into adulthood and beyond, and spend so much time with her. If I'm going to do those things, I have to be healthy.
Right. And you this is such a great point that you're bringing up, because I talk about my 4 major cogs with brain, body, bonding, and business. Brain, of course, is your mindset, and sometimes includes your faith. Body is our physical health, what we're talking about right now. bonding is our relationships, and that's not just romantic relationships, but our relationships with family, with friends, and business. And then the last one, of course, is business, which is how your production, how you're making money, what you're going out and building. And so everything we do falls into these four major categories, and they're like four legs of a table. And when one of those legs, in this case we're talking about the body leg, if that leg is wobbly, the whole table is wobbly. And if one of those legs breaks, the whole table can come crashing down. Conversely, if you are focusing on your physical health, if your physical health is where it needs to be, everything else, all those other three pillars, if you will, of your life, your business is going to be, if you're in better physical shape, your business is going to be better. You're going to have more energy. Your mindset, you're going to be thinking more clearly. You are going to have better relationships. If we're, to quote from a previous podcast, if we are not eating for our own tongue, to satisfy our own tongue, but if we are eating to serve others, and if we're eating not just for that 15, 20 minutes of gratification, but we're eating it in a way that's going to make us feel good later, and then we're going to have energy so that we can play with our sons and daughters, and we can go out and take them on trips, and we can walk and hike and show them the world without getting fatigued or without getting injured easily. And so that, when our little boy wants us to play catch when we come home at night, that, we're not too exhausted, we're not falling asleep on the couch and snoring. And all of those things come into play, and it really is crucial that we focus on our physical health, because it makes everything else in our lives better.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to do that. I'm trying to look at myself holistically and improve. The thing you said to me yesterday, and you didn't just say it to me, you said it as part of your morning mindset, but, create the life that you don't feel you need to escape from. That's humongous for me, because my escapism was either food and sitting in front of the television,
Sure.
Which, food is for nutrition, but honestly, the way I was eating, it was not.
I was the same way.
And,
for me, it was food and escaping into my cell phone and my apps and, playing stupid games and wasting my time. And, that was my escape. For me, it was easy to keep Cheetos in the cupboard and ice cream in the fridge. And, I felt like my hands were tied to do anything else. Of course, my hands were tied because, again, it was my own limiters that I placed on myself. I didn't feel like I had any other options when there really are other options.
Yeah, I hear you. And the create a life you don't have to escape from. Often when I get time off from work, and I'm getting more of that these days, which is nice, because I'm working a position that, I love what I do, and which is great. That actually is very positive for me, because I do love what I do now. And, I feel like I'm helping a lot of people.
Sure.
And I'm a recreation therapist. So,
right.
I'm working with developmentally disabled folks. And I can tell you that, that's very satisfying. So that's
absolutely.
That's another part of my life that has kind of come on board in a good way.
Absolutely.
And that kind of helps me out, because, when I come home, not to say I don't have any stress in my job, but when I come home, I'm a lot less stressed out than I used to be.
Sure.
And, I'm working less hours overall. I still work full time, of course, but, I used to work 3 jobs at one point. So, I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and that's made a major difference. And I think now it's like, okay, well, that part of my life is in line. That leg of my table is in line.
Right.
Let's work on some of the other legs, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Now, as far as that leg of the table now, I know that's what you're doing 9 to 5, but I'm seeing also the great work that you do outside of work as an artist.
That's true.
Talk to us a little bit about what you do. I'm very familiar with it, but tell everyone else about the work that you do as a photographer and as an artist, because that's, I get the idea you're doing work that you really, really like a lot. When it comes to the art, I see it in your eyes. You love this shit.
Yeah, it's true. I create a lot of digital pieces these days that I get to print on canvas, and I go through a couple print on demand services, and people can put my stuff on canvases or T-shirts or whatever they like. I love that. I love creating things. Mm-hmm. So much of my life for a while there was not. I felt like I was kind of stagnating. I didn't feel like I was creating anything in the world. And I thought when I pass away someday, what am I going to have as a legacy? And
Sure.
Obviously my daughter would be that a legacy for me.
Yeah.
But
such a great point there too, because if we're not creating, we're consuming.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
we need to be creating and building new things and making our own legacy and making our own imprint.
yeah. And I can tell you that one process for me in the last maybe 2 years or so, I create a piece of art every single day. Now, is this a Mona Lisa every day? No, but I create art every day because it makes me feel good. Makes me feel good about myself. And if somebody else likes my art, that's a bonus. But frankly, I make art for myself. And if other people want to, share and partake in that art, and they want to have it in their home or on a T-shirt to walk around with or whatever,
sure,
on a coffee mug, that's fine. But I mean, and I'm not looking to make a lot of money doing it. But I mean, honestly, it's the art is something that it's therapeutic for me.
Right. And that kind of feeds into the mindset component. And I'm talking about the brain component of the four major cogs. Is, of course, art is a great form of expression, and if you have that form of expression, if you have that as an outlet, I think that can really go a long way for you. It's a great form of recreation, and if you're doing what you love, I mean, that could spill over into being part of your business.
Yeah. And
I know it is kind of a business for you on the side, but yeah, I mean that's one of those things that you can keep building towards because I know you love that kind of thing, and I get the idea if you were doing that kind of work every day, you wouldn't feel too much need to have to avoid it like you talked about on the morning mindset yesterday.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And
not at all. If I could be a full-time artist, I mean, I'd be very satisfied.
Keep working, keep building, and because I mean you do some amazing work, and
thank you.
It might not happen overnight, but we're all trying to create something. Well, I shouldn't say we all are, but a lot of us are trying to create something bigger. I'm trying to create something larger myself, and if you have to stick with it, and you'd be surprised about what you can create.
Thank you. I agree.
How can everybody find you?
Oh, well, I'm,
as far as your art,
Yeah, I haven't really put it out there yet. I haven't released it. I've got a couple things on a couple websites, but, nothing I'm ready to promote just yet, just because, I would rather sort of burst onto the scene with, hey, look at all this stuff. So it's coming, it's in the works, but, I'm not quite there yet. Nothing there's no hashtag for me or anything like that at this point, but it's in the works.
Okay. Well, when it does come out, folks, I'll be one of the first to know, or at least it better be. And so I will be making you all very aware of what Tracy has to offer, because his art is phenomenal. He's designed the art for this podcast and also for the Matrix, my online community. And he was able to develop these graphics in such a very short amount of time, and they're brilliant, and they were exactly what I wanted. And if you saw some of the photography that he's doing for me this past weekend, today, and probably we'll be doing some even tomorrow, the photography skills are top notch. And so as an artist, Tracy is really killing the game here. So I thank you very much for being on today. Thank you very much for the great work that you've done for the Fitness Psychologist and for the Matrix, and for what likely is going to be on either the front or back or both covers of the book upcoming. And it's been such a pleasure to have you here in Florida. Pleasure to have you on today. Folks, once again, if any of this has resonated with you, please go on and leave us a 5-star review. It's never too late to get started with new habits. You're not alone. In talking with Tracy today, you'll see that you're not alone. We've all had these barriers that get in the way of our fitness, whether it's, like I said, nutrition or exercise or both. But getting some insight into what happens and what's going on, and figuring out what those barriers are, and figuring out alternatives and other ways to fill those voids in our lives, I think you'll be surprised at the results that you can get. And it can take a little while, but it might not take as long as you think. So everybody make it a great one. Take care, and as always, be good to yourselves.